Hey everybody, I'm Hob.
I'm Jamie.
And you're watching Dutch and Dragons. And today's episode is all about the leftovers. And I tell you what next week's episode is all about, but we didn't pick anything. So it'll be a surprise.
Surprise! Alright, today's first question. What can you do if your players are not invested in the story you're spinning?
Change the story.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's...
basically, that is the option.
Yeah, so unfortunately, if your players aren't invested in the story that you're spinning, either there's a disconnect, they don't understand, or there is a functional problem with the story that you're telling. And it may be that they're just not invested in the type of story that you're telling.
It could be. It could be that they're not invested in the type of story. It could be that there's something else going on in their lives that they're more focused on than D&D.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
I mean, part of it is you could just talk to your player. I always start with ask. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge mystery. Just ask them. If they go, well, this is just not interesting to us, then change your story.
True. In most cases, it's a conversation and a renegotiation of the gameplay agreement, as it were, or the gameplay relationship. They as always, it's a collaborative storytelling process. So maybe they're not invested because it's not their kind of story.
Yeah.
So have that conversation. Next question.
How do you make sure that your players get the right information to move the story forward? The easiest answer to that is make sure that the information can be gotten.
Received is a good word, yes.
I've used up all my brain cells this week.
Jamie is decaffeinated at the moment and requires fuel.
Yeah. Anyhow, make sure that the information can be gotten from multiple sources.
Yeah. So I tend to try and provide at least 3 sources of any vital information. Now, the method of delivery may be different depending on the source that it's coming from or which character is receiving the information, but I always try and make sure that the party is able to obtain anything that's vital to the game moving forward from multiple sources. Otherwise, what happens, Jamie?
They get off chasing rainbows and you never see them again.
Your game stalls. And your plot is unable to move forward until you find some way to railroad your party back onto the tracks.
Yeah, and there's this thing that people say they don't want to info dump on their characters, which basically means they don't want to put in a mechanism where the character comes up to somebody and they get the whole story all at once. It's just one big info dump. Because then your characters are not discovering the story.
Right.
And discovering the story is always going to be more interesting than an info dump. But if you guys are so far afield that the only way to bring them back around is to use the info dump, it's better than... our picture looks like it's doing a wave to me.
Because it kind of is.
Because it kind of is.
All right. See if that helps.
But the info dump is better than nothing.
True story.
So avoid the info dump if you can, but if you get to a part where you just have to info dump on your characters,
info dump away. So those are really kind of the keys there.
All right, and next question.
1 second. We're gonna order coffee. We'll be right back. And like magic, we're back.
Yes. Okay, you might want to scooch up.
Oh, hey, yeah, I might want to scooch up.
Yeah, you might want to scooch up.
I shall do the scooching.
He's holding up the coffee line.
I have scooched.
Awesome.
Go me.
How much player interaction should there be in crafting a story?
I think that depends a lot on your players.
I agree.
And I say that because sometimes your players want to add to the story. They want to add to the world. Sometimes they don't necessarily want to add to the world, even though they want to add to the story. Mm-hmm. So it's you got to find that balance, but it's very much dependent on the player and or players. And we have some players who are very invested in whatever story it is that we're telling, and they want to participate in it, and they want to add to it, and they want to create things in the world, and we let them. And the ones who don't, don't worry about it because they're enjoying what they like about the gameplay experience and the story.
I always say that I start with broad brushstrokes in my stories. The bad guy, the general idea of what is going on kind of a thing, but the details, a lot of times I will let my players fill those in.
Even if they don't know that they're filling them in.
Even if they don't know that they're doing it, they'll say something or they'll latch onto an idea or a concept that I will then weave into the story because my players love to think that they're figuring things out as they go along. And a lot of times they are. Things that I had already pre-planned. But sometimes their ideas actually work so well in the story. I just go, yep, that's what's going on.
True.
What level of detail should you expect in player game notes?
This goes way back.
This really depends again on your player.
It does. It does a lot.
As a whole.
I don't expect them to write down every single detail, but I do expect them to take enough notes that they can look at it a week or two later and have an idea of what's going on in the game. Sometimes that works better than others.
So if I have a new player and they say, I don't know what to make notes about, I always tell them to answer the who, what, and where. So, who, we got sent to go pick apples for John Bob and met a giant beast. Well, okay, so who's John Bob? The where is the town of Apples. Really tired, you guys.
She's doing real good.
And the what is we're gonna go get these apples. So just have a general picture because I tell my players, these people, the NPCs you interact with, you want to know who they are because they're going to be resources you can revisit later.
Yeah.
Say you think that what's going on is there's a big cursed apple. Well, who better to go talk to about apples than the apple farmer you did that quest for that one time?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always just say answer the very basic questions of who, what, where, and when, and then just don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good way to go.
All right, next question. How does magic impact your world positively or negatively? See, and this is one of the things I find kind of frustrating about 5e that I really liked about the setting of A Red and Pleasant Land, where using magic affects the world. It can have horrible consequences. Like every magic comes at a price.
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on the setting that you're operating in, magic can have all sorts of different effects on the world. Wild magic is an attempt to show the world's effect on magic, but when you think about magic in terms of power, kings and kingdoms and emperors and holy orders, in many cases, might seek out mages and magic users, which should be
I don't know why we're so
I don't know what's going
today.
on with this today. We're wibbly
really
wobbly.
Struggling here.
It's a struggle bus kind of day apparently. Anyhow, so these institutions of order and rule and law could potentially seek out magic users because this is an uncontrolled influencer in their kingdom or in their sphere of influence that could potentially just come in and disrupt the entirety of a nation. Think about a sorcerer summoning or a wizard summoning thousands of pounds of gold into existence. Economic obliteration in an instant. Deposing kings. Imagine what would happen if an unknown wizard walked into a courtroom, into a king's court, and let off a fireball.
And a wizard walks into a court?
A wizard walks into a court, lets off a fireball. Say goodbye to your kingdom.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I know I circle back to this example a lot because I feel like it's a good example for a lot of things, but in the Wheel of Time, there's an instance where they are making the weather favorable to a ship's journey, but they also talk about the consequences that brings about, flooding farms, etc., etc.
Yep. And we're gonna get that coffee. And we're back. Like
I just think you should think about it this way. For every action, right, there's a positive
and negative reaction.
Yep. So you have to just think about what those are for your world. Maybe somebody making a tiny firelight is not going to be as big of a deal.
But somebody calling down a storm of snow and ice on a large area could disrupt weather patterns all over the world.
Recently, in one of my games, my players destroyed what amounts to Las Vegas in one of my worlds. So all of a sudden, here's this big money maker for this kingdom just gone.
Yeah.
And so that's going to have some consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question.
Next page. Ooh, wow. Should I tell my players what kind of game style I'll be running, i.e. combat heavy, dungeon/hex crawl, intrigue, mystery, eldritch, horror, etc.?
The short answer, yes. Partially because that is how you establish some of the tone for the game. It lets your players know what types of characters they should be thinking about creating, what kind of setting to expect. You should definitely talk to your players about the style of gameplay. It may also allow them to opt out if it's not their style of gameplay, which is not a bad thing. You may run a campaign that is predominantly a hex crawl, with pockets of exploration in there, and that might not be for everybody who participates in your game, and they may opt out, which allows you to bring in new players, that kind of stuff.
I've seen some people say, no, you shouldn't, because they don't like their players optimizing characters for the kind of game. They just want to have, like, random people thrown into it. Which, I am going to say, if your plan is to take ordinary humans and put them into an extraordinary kind of game or a horror, that can also be conveyed to your players, and then you should be restricting what is available for them to make.
To some extent, I realize that some people, they don't want their players to make optimized characters for the style of game. Mm-hmm. I understand this frustration because I have players who love to make characters that break the game. Very intentionally, they aim for ways to make or to take aspects of a certain style of gameplay away. They do it because they think it's going to be fun. Invariably, it bites them in the ass. But the general idea is that you're talking to your players about the style of game that you're going to run so that they have an expectation of what the tone is, not necessarily what elements they're going to face within the game. So you can have a hex crawl that they are never going to be able to optimize for because they are going to be facing things that are going to challenge what they think they've optimized for. Mm-hmm. You can have an eldritch horror game like that does not challenge the things that they've optimized for, where they are at a disadvantage. And let's face it, eldritch horror, if you are facing things in eldritch horror, you're probably playing wrong. So anyhow, that's the idea, is that you should set the expectation of what style of game you're going to be playing or running, and your players should then be able to create characters that, with that in mind, but not necessarily optimized to impact that.
Right. And if they have optimized to impact that and you are unhappy about it, say no.
Yeah, say no. It's okay.
All right. Next question. Is there something you would change about the D&D magic system? Yeah.
There are a lot of things I would change. There are a lot of things that I would change about the D&D magic system. Whether or not any of them would be more or less effective or functional, I don't know.
Yeah, nobody knows.
I get really, really frustrated by the spell slot system.
I hate the spell slot system.
I think that it is lacking. I think it's a mechanic that is lacking in elegance. Right. And it's kludgy, and I feel like it's inadequate to the system, especially when you consider that they spread it across all of the magic casting classes.
Which is everyone.
Right, and it doesn't seem appropriate to a sorcerer who really should be operating off of something more akin to, like, magic points, or something of that sort, and it doesn't really seem to fit with the idea of the warlock either, which again I think should be more oriented towards magic points or some kind of a blood magic pact or something like that. You know what I mean? Like depending on what kind of pact they've gone with.
I also don't like that if you're trying to play a mid to minor fantasy-esque game, everybody is slinging spells.
Right.
Everybody. Magic's not amazing or scary because I'm going to walk in and do prestidigitation, but so can everybody else in the room.
Yeah, it's the magic.
Too prevalent.
The magic casting ability is too commonplace in the system now, and it is. It doesn't feel like it's unique or special in any way
Because
whatsoever
everybody can
in
spell
5e.
spells.
Some other systems are better about it, some are worse about it, so there you go.
Yeah, the answer is we would change a lot, but but part of the problem, and I think how it got to where it is just by sheer, we don't know how we would change it. Should a DM change the game if the players don't respond well to a certain style of game? Yes and no. It depends to me. If it's if it's a majority of my players that don't respond to a certain style of game, let's say we ran a hex crawl. We ran two styles of hex crawls. We ran one that was a straight hex crawl, wander around and find things. And we ran another one where they could see where they were going, but they didn't necessarily know what was in the intervening space.
Yep.
The first type of hex crawl, nobody responded well to. They did not like that in the least.
True.
I would not do that again with this group of players because the majority of them didn't like it. And the whole point is to play a game that you like.
I might try it again, but I might do it a little bit differently.
Now,
but
lots of my players liked we can see where we're going, we just don't really know how to get there. I would do that one again, but I have one player was like, no, I wouldn't do any of it. Well, one player, I might just be like, suck it up, everybody else likes it, or you give up your seat for this.
Right, for this campaign.
Or I might limit it to, there's some hex crawl, and then there's some other stuff mixed in. So it's really just dependent on, and who it is. I have some players who are like, well, it's not my thing, but if everyone else likes it, I'm totally willing to give it a go.
Yeah.
So it depends. That's really player.
Yeah, it's more of a player-driven kind of thing. Number of players and the general consensus on the style. If everybody wants to opt out, then
my ears are all plugged up. I feel like I'm shouting.
You are not.
I'm not shouting.
You are not. You're
okay,
fine.
Good. I'm shouting at you.
We got time for like one more, I think.
All right, last one from the leftover box. I'm going to pick this one up.
Oh, that's
super
a fat
fast.
one. Oh, that's just because it's the bottom of a page.
Yeah. Is it okay to limit source materials such as homebrew, expansion books for player character creation?
Homebrew or expansion books?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I strongly encourage the limitation of source material. I actually strongly encourage the limitation of the rules as written material.
Yeah.
Going into the player's handbook and saying that Eldritch Knights are not a character class subtype that can be played is perfectly acceptable. Arcane Tricksters, banning those from your game, totally acceptable. There are no sorcerers in your world. That's totally acceptable.
There are no priests in this
There
world.
are no clerics, or there are no barbarian tribes, or there are no whatever. I mean, you could any number of things. And there's no magic associated with song or tales. You know, bards are just bards. They don't have any magic unless they're another character class.
Yeah, there's you can totally tailor the classes and what your players can play to your game. That's completely fine.
Just do it up front.
Yeah, just do it up front. Don't say, oh yeah, you can use every single book that has ever been written, and then once they start doing it, go, oh, whoops, my bad, this sucks, change. Unless that is something that you have talked about previously
right.
with them. If you have gone, hey, there's this homebrew, like somebody said, hey, I want to try an artificer. And I was like, I don't know how well an artificer is going to play in this, but you're welcome to try it. If it doesn't work out, we'll switch.
And turns out it didn't work out.
So we killed them off and switched. It was great.
Yep, it was good fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
I've gone back and forth on the concept of feats in the game, and I think I've landed finally on the side of feats aren't allowed in my games anymore.
See, I don't particularly like feats because I pull a lot of my. I love one-use magic items, y'all. I just love them. I think they're so fun. It gives your characters, it gives your players a chance to really do a lot of cool things, but one time. And I pull a lot of my one-use magic items from feats.
Yeah.
A lot of them, and from feats from all of the books.
Yeah.
From 4E and everywhere.
Yeah,
I love it.
We pull from all over the place for one-use magic items and all sorts of other stuff, long-term magic items. So we actually pull from a lot of other source material when we're doing things, but it's tailored specifically to the game and to the players.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it's okay to limit that source material and to tailor it specific to the game and the players. And you can, after saying, no, I'm not going to allow this, if there's good reason, make an exception.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's your game. You're allowed to break the rules however much you want, as long as it doesn't adversely affect your fun.
Yeah.
So that's all the time that we have today. We want to thank you again for watching. If you hate what we're doing, or you love what we're doing, go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you really like what we're doing, go ahead and click the little bell and select all notifications.
I think it's hilarious that you encourage people to hate watch us.
Hey, you know what? Hate watch away. We love you anyways. We really do.
He does, I don't.
Leave your comments and questions below, and we will add them to one of our later videos.
Yep.
Thank you again for joining us, everyone.
Have fun storming the castle.